Hello, and welcome to the latest Chronicles video. In this one, I'd like to explore the theme of anti-war protest, which was yet another demonstration by the generations of the Golden Era, via the culture of the Golden Era, of things about the establishment up until the 1960s that the Golden Era generations found unacceptable, which was the acceptability of war, the peddling of warmongering, and the vilification and stigmatizing of pacifism. These were items of established social conduct up until the 1960s, which the Golden Era generations protested against. I'm going to give you just some examples of that, and there are many, far too many to mention in a short video, and so therefore I'd like the people on Chronicles, people watching this video, to give more examples of your own down in the comments section, especially on the YouTube video, but as well on Facebook. Okay, I'm going to start from 1961, in fact, and it's a novel. The enigmatic, satirical, abstract, brilliant novel Catch-22 by Joseph Heller, which describes events in the Mediterranean at the latter stages of World War II on an American airbase. Now, I can't go into details about Catch-22. Well, papers are written on Catch-22, essays are written on Catch-22. Brilliant novel, of course. What can I say? You have to read it all through, get to the last chapter. I always tell people that's when you'll start to understand what's gone before. And you start to see that Heller is satirically describing war, not as some noble venture or some promotion of higher ideology, no, but as a business enterprise in which the various involved factions and those who are running the show all kind of feed off each other and profit each other. A brilliant novel, definitely an anti-war message, and shows war really, in modern times anyway, for what it is. Let's go to some songs. There are many, many songs that have to be described as anti-war songs. Okay, let's take an example. Give Peace a Chance, John Lennon. Written for the late 60s moratorium on Vietnam, in which discussion was held and suspension of activities and so on Vietnam political and military policy, while the mass protest against war generally, but especially the high-profile Vietnam War, was really, really powerful. And there was protest all over the world, of course, especially in America. And John Lennon specifically wrote Give Peace a Chance to support the moratorium and support the protests against the Vietnam War. It's a very, very well-known song. All we're saying is give peace a chance. And in this song, Lennon condemns what he calls isms. In other words, there's too much talking going on. This is a very simple concept. Give peace a chance. Why don't we just see what happens if we give peace a chance? Stop the war, see if we can get on without it. Instead of ism, finding this to talk about, that to talk about, intellectualizing, pin stroking, doing too much talking, exploring the ideas, political thinking, blah, blah, blah. No. It really is this simple. All we're saying is give peace a chance. Another song around the same time, 1969, Donovan, To Susan on the West Coast waiting, from Andy in Vietnam fighting. This really brings it home as a personal issue, war. Andy has been drafted into the army, he's in Vietnam, and this is just a personal impact, love letter to his love back in the West Coast of America, from whom he obviously has been separated. And it has some beautiful lines. Hear me when I say, there will come a day when kings will know and love will grow. This is a very personal look at the impact that war has on people sent away to fight and those they leave behind. Beautiful song. By 1970, things were getting bullish and more insistent. People were getting a little fed up asking nicely. So I go to the Edwin Starr song, War. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. It's, again, a very well-known song and much covered, very successfully covered some years ago by Bruce Springsteen, of course. But the Edwin Starr version remains, I think, the most powerful version, especially for the time that it was released, 1970, when pressure to end the Vietnam War was really gathering pace and gathering power and would be successful some few years later. And the whole concept of war and warmongering was being questioned and challenged, and pacifism was becoming noble and laudable instead of being stigmatized, which it had been really up until the 1960s. Other examples. I'm going to go to a song called, and this is a bit of a left field one, this is a Hawkwind song from the album Quark, Strangeness and Charm, which I think came out in 1977, I think. It's a very hard-hitting song. It's typical Hawkwind, very cosmic rock, prog rock, hard riffing, but a very different kind of psychedelic sound to it. The lyrics describe a post-nuclear war world. And again, they're hard-hitting, they're pull no punches. And the great chorus in the song, thank you, Dr. Strangelove, for going doolally and leaving me the heritage in Damnation Alley. That ties into the 1964 movie Dr. Strangelove, starring Peter Sellers, in which war again is exposed, war and warmongering and weaponizing the weapons industry and the science of war. Scientists put to applying their skills and their genius towards the making of war and the making of more and more destructive weapons. Dr. Strangelove, the movie, mentioned in the song Damnation Alley, talks about how the West, particularly America, after World War II, rescued and accommodated Nazi scientists to start work for the West, for America, to really build the next generation of weapons for the next war, which in effect had already begun, now known as the Cold War, the war between communism and Western democratic capitalism, really started before, in fact, really before the Second World War had ended. It was certainly well underway by the late 40s, early 50s. And the defeated Nazis had their best scientists recruited, probably by both sides, to develop the weapons that were going to, it was supposed, I guess, win the next World War, which turned out to be the Cold War, a standoff between the two ideologies based on fear of each other because of the next generation of weapons, devised in part by the Nazi scientists who had been the villains, all Nazism, the Nazi scientists who had worked for the villains during the Second World War. Those are some examples of songs, of movies, of novels. How about some personalities? Let's go to sport. Muhammad Ali, the world heavyweight boxing champion, the greatest world heavyweight boxing champion, the greatest boxer there has ever been, but a man who is above boxing and beyond boxing and stands as a giant humanitarian. In 1966, he was called to be drafted into the US military. during the Vietnam War, and he refused. He refused on the grounds that he was standing up for the poor and oppressed and disempowered right there in America. And he was not going to go to the other side of the world to fight the poor and oppressed and disempowered in the name of the very powers that he was trying to stand up to at home. He told the authorities that he'd willingly go to prison, he'd willingly lose everything, rather than fight against poor, oppressed people anywhere in the world. When first he had to stand up for his own people, particularly the African American community in America, and every poor, oppressed, disempowered people around the world. And for that, he wasn't put in prison, but he was stripped of his world heavyweight title. He was stripped of his wealth, his fame, his name was defamed, but he took that rather than be drafted into military service and go and fight in a war that he did not believe in, and in fact he stood against. That had a big, big impact. Ali was the self-styled, but probably accurately styled, most famous person in the world at the time. He was a huge personality, not just for boxing, but for his principled stance, and that he was willing to give up all his fame, money, successes, world titles for his principles inspired an awful lot of people, and it got into the media and mainstream politicians and set a fantastic example to the world in terms of an anti-war, generally an anti-war protest, and a protest in favor of people who are sent to war, who are just the victims. People don't go to war because they are bloodthirsty or they're killers. They're made to go to war by establishment convention, and these protests challenged that as well. At the same time in the 1960s, Martin Luther King, standing up as well as Ali for the African American community, and in fact for everyone who is oppressed and poor and disempowered. And he made a speech also defending the position of the Vietnamese and wondering what kind of liberators must they see the Americans as. The North Vietnamese had originally quoted from the American Declaration of Independence in support of their wish to be independent themselves. They appealed to the West in those terms way back in the early stages of the war, in the late 1940s, early 1950s, and they were dismayed when the West, particularly America, denied them that right, and it was only then that they started to seek help from the communist powers. Martin Luther King was saying, what kind of liberators must they see us as? And stood up for the poor and oppressed in South Vietnam as well, because the regime there was just as corrupt and tyrannical as in the North. And Martin Luther King, like I say, stood up and made speeches in defense of the poor, of the oppressed, of the disempowered, in the name of giving them freedom, and doing so not by means of war, but by means of understanding their needs to be free and to have freedom, and supporting them in that way. Finally, the video's getting long, so I'll make a final mention for Jimi Hendrix, who played the Star-Spangled Banner at Woodstock. Criticised by some, but he described it himself as something he'd considered beautiful, and I do too. Jimi Hendrix, remember, had been a member of the American military in the early 1960s, and really, his playing of the Star-Spangled Banner was a demonstration that the peace movement, which was very powerful by the 1960s, the peace movement was playing and could play, and had a right to play, the Star-Spangled Banner, because it was a song, an American anthem, that stood for freedom and liberty and the rights of people And he was playing it in that way. And he was also playing it as a heartfelt message to his fellow Americans and fellow servicemen, or he had been a serviceman, sent to a war that they did not want to go to. It was not their choosing, and it was not their will to be there, but they were sent there. And him playing Star Spangled Banner, the American anthem, was partly, I'd say, in tribute to them, in a way of saying, we don't blame you. You were sent there by a system, by the establishment that sent you there. But you're suffering as we are. And I think he was trying to get that across to the whole peace movement thing that was happening at Woodstock at the time. It was a very beautiful expression of what the American national anthem really stands for: the power of people to be free and to express their freedom, and to do so peacefully. A very beautiful example of an anti-war message. I could go on and on, but that's as much as I can say because the video's getting on. I'd like everybody, please subscribe to the channel. Please leave your examples of the anti-war message, the pacifism message that was put across in whichever way culturally during the golden era by our generations, by our culture. Please like the video, please subscribe to the channel, and please leave those comments. Let's get the message out about what our golden era and our generations achieved for the world. With that, I'll say thank you again very much for listening. Take care, and I'll see you next time.